All right, so this room is larger than the last one I was in, and what I know about rooms is that the same guys that sit in the back of these rooms are the guys that were up on top of the gym during all those high school presentations. So because I'm restricted, I have to stay by this microphone because they're going to video this, and I have several restrictions, like, you know, no swearing, no jokes about the legislature. This is really restrictive for me. Usually I walk around and stuff, but they're going to video this. And so hopefully it'll come across okay. And there's a microphone guy who just turned everything up. Way to go. Good job. Everybody here okay? All right. So my name is Jay Wersher. I'm the alcohol and drug guy from Child Welfare. Yes, it's all up there. And I told the last audience this as well. I sit in a cubicle up in Salem, and but I've worked in Child Welfare for 15 years. I've been a DHS employee for 15 years, and I want to say, because times are tough, that I am absolutely proud to say that I work for the Oregon Department of Human Services. I think it's an awesome organization. I think those caseworkers are miracle workers on a daily basis. And, you know, even though there's a lot of negativity that's going around now, those people just work their brains out. And especially, and you guys know this, when you're in the office, because the other set of jokes I can't do, because this is CRB, is do old people jokes. Thank you for laughing. I'm going to be 60. I'm going to be 60 next month. And when I say that, in a child welfare office, people go, "Oh my God, really?" You know, all those 24-year-old caseworkers. But I'm at home here. I think that I'm comfortable here. I'm just a baby. This is why I came here. Okay. So we're going to talk about marijuana, but just for people that don't know, this is kind of a cool position that I have. When I go to national conferences, people say, you know, there are several states that have what they call kind of mature responses to the alcohol and drug issue. And Oregon, if you don't know, is one of the states that we used to be kind of a national model. In 1991, we actually started to have contracts that brought alcohol and drug people into child welfare offices. Most of you just know that we have addiction recovery teams or a FIT team or a STAR team, that we have these contracted A&D service providers in our branches. So our caseworkers have a go-to person that's around the corner, not somebody they have to track down in another building. These are services that the legislature said, we want a service for parents that have the chronic illness of addiction. All of our services are about kids and kid safety, but we have to have something for people who have addiction issues because it's the biggest issue in child welfare across the country and has been for decades. So we have had this service of addiction recovery teams since 1991. And part of what I do is I'm the contract administrator for all of those contracts that supply those people to the branches. And then I'm the alcohol and drug consultant for 1,300 caseworkers. And thank God they don't all call me once in a week. But they use the addiction recovery teams. I'm sure some of you have met those folks or read about those folks. And they also are a pretty dedicated group because a huge percentage of them are in recovery from their own addiction. And they have taken the worst parts of their life and said, I'm going to make that into a tool that will help people in the child welfare system. And so I just think they're rock stars, and I think they're great, and I appreciate them tremendously. And I should also add that we haven't raised any additional money to those contracts for 12 years, so they're not exactly getting rich doing it. But they're super dedicated to those set of parents that have addiction issues. I also thought I would be retired before I ever had to deal with something called legal marijuana. I just didn't think it was going to happen in my career time. And then, wow, it happened fast. And I have a 30-year-old son and an 18-year-old daughter. She goes to college in Colorado, and no, that is not why she went there. And most of you know that Colorado has had legal marijuana for a couple years longer than us. In 2015, the state of Colorado recorded $996 million in marijuana sales. $996 million. And some people said, oh, see what happened when he went legal marijuana? It's like, no, in the years before they still had those sales, they were just all illegal. Now that $996 million is taxed. And all the people that we used to call drug dealers, we now call retail sales personnel. So those salaries of the drug dealers are also taxed. Now, I start this off and people say, well, I thought he'd be kind of anti-marijuana. He's sounding like he wants to set up a shop in town or something. And that is not the case, but I do think I have to keep it in perspective. I've been an addictions counselor for 35 years. I don't do trainings on social drinkers. Nobody's ever, we'd like you to come out, Jay, and talk about people that just like drink once in a while but don't have any problems. No, I don't do that training. The wine industry does that training. You know, Budweiser, it's on your television every night through advertisement. I focus on addiction. I focus on problem drinking. Now we have legal recreational marijuana, and I want to tell you, I don't care about recreational marijuana users. We used to take everybody who smoked pot and clump them into a group, and we just kind of loosely called them all stoners. But all the people who were smoking pot knew there was a dramatic difference between people who used to like to get high once in a while and people who were stoned every day, all day. There's always been that difference. And now, don't get me wrong, we got a bunch of problems connected to legal marijuana, and we're just starting in our state. But there's always been a huge percentage of people who smoke some pot, and they're not in the correction system, and they're not in the child welfare system, and they go to work every day, and they don't bother any of us. And some of them work for organizations that would surprise us. I mean, this is Oregon, right? We know these folks. A bunch of you have relatives. Some of you may be even recreational marijuana users yourselves. And you know that there's a group of people that really haven't bothered anybody. I was doing a training, and we were doing it for a bunch of law enforcement people and community partners, and this commander from a local law enforcement organization said, okay, Jay, here's the deal. We haven't been chasing marijuana users for a long time. I mean, we got other things to do. And he said, but I'll tell you, if I've got a 32-year-old officer with a couple kids at home, and it's toward the end of the shift, and we get a call, it's like, police, please come. There's a bunch of drunk people at the park. And then another call comes in and says, police, please come. There's a bunch of people getting high at this other park. Which park does that officer want to respond to? He's going to go to the park where people are getting high because they're not going to beat him up. They're not going to beat each other up. They're not going to be drunk and crazy and out of control. The reality, you guys, is that one of the reasons marijuana got legalized is in a bunch of ways it's absolutely safer than alcohol. I was surprised, you know, as the stuff rolls out and stories roll out. Colorado, for those of you who are football fans, has this football team called the Broncos. And they won the Super Bowl, and they have a gigantic stadium, and like a lot of pro football stadiums, they have a lot of tailgating. People that come really early, get really drunk, and cause major problems and are scary to kids and offensive and violent towards women. And that doesn't happen at Mile High Stadium anymore. You know, the law enforcement guys have said, look, there's a bunch of people and they come and they kind of do the tailgating and they're smoking some pot and they're not doing all that crazy stuff that drunk people do. My dad was drunk every day I grew up. And I have all kinds of stories about drunk behavior, and I've got 35 years in this business about dealing with people who overutilize alcohol. And they're really dangerous. And marijuana doesn't pose quite that same level. But for people our age, it's still really hard to deal with that we legalize this stuff. So now that I've made it sound like no big deal, let me go the other way. We have dead children in this country because of parental marijuana use. So while I can say it makes you less violent and it causes problems of a different degree. If you have a parent who's getting stoned that much, they cannot care for infants. And there's a difference between an alcoholic and a social drinker. And there's a major difference between a stoner and a recreational marijuana user. And so as this thing has become legal, some people thought, all marijuana use is okay. No, not any more than all alcohol use is okay. So as it's become legal, and people have tried to make us believe that it's not a problem at any level, I want to point out an organization who has been telling us this for a long time. There's a group called the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, and for years we heard of this thing called NORML, the National Organization for the Reform. Oh my God, those are those pro-marijuana guys. You know, they're Rastafarian and probably wear tie-dye every day. You know, it's like a bunch of them are attorneys that were trying to protect people who sold pot from 25-year sentences. You can be a pedophile and sexually assault kids and get less time at the federal level than you can for selling pot. That's sort of crazy. And if you go on the NORML website, there is a section called something like appropriate use of cannabis, and the first thing is never with children. And the second thing is never when you're driving. If every parent who smoked pot in our state actually did it according to the responsible use processes on the NORML website, we wouldn't even have to have this conversation. But there's all kinds of stuff about appropriate drinking as well. And you all know that the people we deal with are not the people who appropriately use anything. So we're going to take off, and I'm going to talk about some stuff about marijuana. And as you ask questions, I got to make sure I repeat them so they go onto the film and the video that people can hear them. But I want you to know two things as I start this off. It's here to stay. It may be, for people my age, a lot less of a problem than you think. And for people who aren't my age, it still has the potential to be deadly to children. In that way, it's kind of like alcohol. There's a lot of parallels to alcohol. And I've got, I'm the fun part about being in a Salem job is you get calls from all 36 counties. And some of them are crazy, and some of them are funny. And one of the calls I got was, Jay, can you do this consultation on this case? We had this parent who delivered marijuana to their child. It's like, and delivered, of course, is kind of delivery of substances. It's legal. It's okay. So what happened? Well, this mom, she has a medical marijuana card, and she made these brownies for herself, and she told her son not to use those brownies. And I'm thinking, I remember being told not to eat the brownies. So, okay, so then what happens? Then he and his friend ate all these marijuana brownies. I know, but then what happened? I mean, how did anybody know that? It's that they went to the kid's house, the neighbor kid's house, and they were giggling and laughing and being silly and stupid, and the neighbor. Giggling and laughing is not a safety threat in any part of the Department of Human Services. And I understand that a parent didn't track that product and a kid got into it. And those are things we have to look at, and we're going to talk about those today. But part of this is that all new stuff that we're dealing with. Some of you have liquor cabinets, and they're not locked. And the rules are that no kid better go in there. And some have. And some of you grew up with liquor cabinets and you knew you shouldn't go in them, and some of you did. My dad was alcoholic and he hid his alcohol, but my sister and I knew where it was. So that happens in a house. And we're going to get into more detail, but the first thing, I want to repeat this throughout the day, is edibles are different. A product that has marijuana inside, when it's packaged as a brownie or a cookie or a gummy bear, has to be secured in a way that says we're smart enough to know that's going to be attractive to a kid. So when people say, we don't make people lock their prescription drugs up in the bathroom, it's Yeah, but they're in child-proof containers, and they're in the bathroom where the medicine is, and there's clear rules and decades of personal philosophy and family functioning that says these are adult things. That's Dad's liquor cabinet. You don't go in there. And by the way, if a kid takes a swig, how many of you remember this? It's the only exercise you'll get through the whole day, by the way. How many of you remember taking that first swig of a hard liquor? And you can still feel the burn. There's like a post-traumatic stress disorder. It's like I'm going to try this. It's like, oh my God. Sometimes that kept you from ever drinking again, or at least for a couple of years. I mean, your parents probably knew, just, no, let him drink that one. Go ahead. Yeah, watch this. There's some of that happens. That doesn't happen with a brownie. That doesn't happen with a cookie or a candy bar. Those are kid products. And so it comes out like, well, what can DHS legally say? And the Oregon Health Authority was coming out with guidelines, and they've said, you got to put that stuff under lock and key. Lock and key for cookies? No, lock and key for marijuana-infused products that kids could potentially abuse and hurt themselves with. All right, I have slides. We should look at them. So statistically, 42% of Americans who smoke pot, 92% of marijuana users consume marijuana less than weekly. So, when you're in child welfare or the police department or treatment programs, we don't see those 92%. When you look at different studies, about 8% of people who use pot end up as cannabis dependent or having a problem. That sort of replicates alcohol. When you look at alcohol, people who drink alcohol, about 10% of people who drink alcohol meet the criteria for alcohol dependent, so we could call them alcoholic. So 9 out of 10 people don't have a problem with alcohol, 10% do. About the same thing with marijuana. Now, y'all know that we see those people. We see the 8%. We see the 10%. Right? We see the people with addictions. We don't get a lot of social drinkers in child welfare. You can't drop into conversations. Oh, do you like Merlot? I found something from Yamhill County. No, you can't. That's not how they drink if they're in our system. Right? They're not talking about when they went to wine country and picked up a few $60 bottles and they really like a red with. That's not how our clients go about that use. Okay? Now, the other thing that, this may or may not be true. You'll decide once you hear it. I've been given authority from the White House. Okay, that's not true. That's just not true. But here's my advice to you, and I tell every caseworker this. This is the state of Oregon. It is now legal. Every one of you, and I'm serious about this, need to go to your communities and go into the stores that sell recreational marijuana. Y'all have the alcohol education. I mean, if you go to Costco, you can't get to the fruit until you go through that massive wine department anymore. You got to go through 9,000 bottles of wine to get to the croissants. They put the alcohol wall up on the back of Costco. You can't go to Fred Meyer, Albertsons, or Safeway. I mean, the alcohol stuff, we all know that. Everybody here knows the difference between Merlot and Michelob. You know wine from hard liquor, from beer. How many of you, raise your hand, see the Midwest people, how many of you know what near beer or 3-2 beer is? How many of you are from the Midwest? About the same group, some of the same group. Right? So near beer is low percentage alcohol. So if you're sitting and you want to go fishing in the state of Minnesota and you go get a bunch of near beer and you go out to your boat, you can drink beer all day long and barely get a buzz because there's so little alcohol in it. Your bladder would explode before you really got drunk. I mean, it's really low alcohol beer. Okay? And there's variations in those kinds of products. Okay? And there's variations in the marijuana products. Now, just a little bit of history. Prohibition, that time in America's history where we made alcohol illegal and also taught everybody how to really drink. Because when we made alcohol illegal, women weren't drinking that much. But then it all changed. Once it became a criminal thing, man, the women just jumped in with both feet. It was just something about that. But, they went into all those speakeasies and all those places, and they noticed that men were idiots because they were drinking this rot gut, horrible, straight alcohol. Give me a shot of Jack. And they said, this is terrible. Oh, well, put raspberries in it. Put Coca-Cola in it. Put 7-Up in it. Put orange and lime and put stuff in there so it doesn't really taste like alcohol. And that's where mixed drinks started. Everybody has a favorite mixed drink. Now, I had an alcoholic dad, but I went in the United States Navy to get my training on alcohol. And I didn't like the whole concept of alcohol. And a guy from Chicago said, oh, here, you'll like this. Kahlua and cream. Now, for those of you who haven't had Kahlua and cream, it basically tastes like chocolate milk. And since I was a jock in high school, I drank a lot of milk, and I drank a lot of chocolate milk that first night in the form of Kahlua and cream. And then I got on a troop boat, and I went across the Holy Loch in Scotland in the boat. It was an alcohol training exercise that I will never forget. But it tasted okay. We took the alcohol products and we gave them a bazillion names and a bazillion different kinds of advertisements and put a billion different things in so that everybody had a kind they liked. And then we did the same with coffee. A bunch of you know that there was a time when you went into a store to buy coffee and you went in and you said, could I have a coffee? Because that was the only name for it at the time. And there was cream and sugar over there, and you could throw that in if you wanted, but most people just drank coffee. Now, who goes to Starbucks? Okay, give me one name. Go ahead and say it. It's a vanilla latte. It's a vanilla latte. We get French names in it. Who has a 4-word name for their coffee? Anybody? Vende latte, what? Frappe? Those aren't even really words, are they? Are those really words? It's like, how many of you have ever had a coffee drink that has the word shot in it? There they are. There. See, look at those people right there. See, they are, put their hands down right away. Americana with a certain kind of shot. Okay, the term shot comes from the alcohol industry, and so coffee just followed the alcohol industry. Marijuana has done the exact same thing. And I started this part of the conversation by saying you all need to go in and get educated, because for the rest of the time you're going to be doing this job, you're going to have people that are using and abusing marijuana products. And I don't care how much pot you smoked in college back in the 60s, 70s, or 80s, whenever you did that, or whenever you were around people that did it, it's changed. And if you think those stores look like little head shops and people in tie-dye with stuff under the shelf that's illegal, no, they look like 31 flavors. They're clean and crisp. And you got to show your license to get behind there because they have to do their business in cash because the feds won't let them use the banking system. And they have a bazillion different kinds of pot. Would you like a raspberry blend? I think you might like a raspberry blend pot. We used to just, Maui Waui in Colombia. Now we have names that look like coffee names. And you'll go in there, and the first thing that comes to your mind won't be a cannabis-addicted person who can't take care of their kids. This is a market that's aiming at middle class. And so they've completely changed the industry, and you just have to know what it is we're talking about, because it's not the Cheech and Chong movie or the Fast Times at Ridgemont High or what you guys that graduated in 1974 or 78 or 86. It doesn't look like that at all. It looks different. And you should know. You should see it. You should experience it. It's okay to go in there and not buy anything. Nobody's going to take pictures of you and put them on the internet. It's okay. Okay? But I really strongly encourage you to understand that part of it, because we're in Oregon and that stuff's here to stay, and you should see what the products are doing. You can say that Jay Wersher said I should come in here. Jay Wersher from the Oregon Department of Human Services. Now, I give you this as an analogy. With alcohol, we have social drinkers. With marijuana, we have recreational users. We also have problem drinkers, and we have problem users. We have alcoholics, and we have people that, for lack of a better term, really, we kind of refer to as stoners. On the product line, we have beer, and on the marijuana side, we have pot that people smoke. Oh, you got a bowl, you got a bong. If you went today to most pot smokers and said, do you still use a roach clip? It's like, we don't have bugs in our pot, sir. They wouldn't know what that meant. Things are done differently. But when you look at product variation, remember I talked about near beer? Okay, the difference between near beer and Everclear is pretty dramatic. Jack Daniels is not the same as near beer, right? I mean, when you talk about high content alcohol products, you don't drink a quart. Give me a pint of, no, you don't drink a pint of Jack Daniels. That's not what you do, okay? So marijuana has the same thing. And when you see high grade, and often, what we're saying is there's people who use pot recreationally, and then there's a problem level where people have to find a higher grade of pot, more THC, because they're developing a tolerance. They're cannabis dependent. They're becoming addicted to marijuana. And so when you become addicted to marijuana, you can't drink near beer. You can't do the cheap pot. You got to get a higher grade of pot. That costs more. And when you really take off, you can use what are called marijuana extracts at BHO+. BHO stands for butane honey oil. And all of you are hereby assigned when you go home and you go to Google Images and you type in BHO or type in marijuana shatter. And we'll talk about that in a second. And then you have to get used to the names. Bud, which is also my dad's name, and I think that that's perfectly appropriate for an alcoholic. My dad is the best named alcoholic I know. Keef, okay? Keef hash, BHO, butane honey oil, BHO wax. These are terms. Most people haven't heard of BHO and BHO wax. We did a training at central office up in Salem, and it was for DHS employees. And there was about 37, 38 people in there. And we had a clicker system so that everybody in the training could respond to questions, and then we could see the voting. And the statistic came up that 43% of all American adults had tried marijuana at least once in their life. Now, we expected it to be higher because we are in Oregon. So we asked the DHF staff from central office, how many of you have ever tried at least once in your life marijuana? The national average was 43%. The central office response was 88%. Now, they saw it and they laughed as well, sort of like, oh my God, don't publish that anywhere. And now I've just put it on video. So, and I said to them, like I say to all of our staff, I said, that's part of the problem. We have a perception that we know what pot is because people have smoked some pot. But the products that are out there that are doing the most damage are things that none of us have ever seen, none of us have ever experienced. And they're not 3-2 beer, they're like Everclear. So when people say, oh, you know, when I smoke pot, I say to a caseworker, I don't care about when you smoke pot. I don't care how much pot you smoked. I don't care about when you did it. None of your personal experience belongs in the investigation of child welfare cases. Your personal experience can inform you. If you know what a bong is, I'm glad you know what a bong is. If you walk into a house and you see a bong, you will know that is a bong. That is used for smoking. It can inform your investigation, but you can't take your personal experience and apply it to the investigation. And so when we have people, 88%, that have experienced pot, that doesn't mean they know what cannabis-dependent folks in 2016 actually look like. Because most of those people had never heard the word shatter and had never heard the term BHO. And we'll talk about what those are in a bit. These are the people we worry about. NIDA, the National Institute of Drug Abuse, did a study and talked about those people, those hardcore users, groups of people that are high 12 to 18 hours a day. And, there's a lot of people that say, well, you really can't get addicted to pot, can you? It's like, absolutely, of course you can. Right? And people say, well, the good thing is, it's not as bad as alcohol, which, by the way, is a really low bar. It's a really low, there's a lot of things. Drunk drivers kill somebody about every 30 minutes. So we don't want to match the alcohol bar, right? But people don't overdose on marijuana. Okay, we don't have overdose deaths. We have heroin overdose deaths, lots of opiate overdoses. You can overdose on alcohol. We don't have marijuana overdoses. But we have people that are stoned, and that's about that 8% mark, 12 to 18 hours a day. You can't track your 2-month-old when you're stoned 12 to 18 hours a day. You really can't track anything. The Oregon Health Authority kind of got on the fast track. This was this week. We thought the edible thing was going to come into play this fall. And they just passed rules and said, now here was kind of the shocker. Everybody went, oh my God, what are they doing? Why are they speeding this up? The marijuana people are not happy because the marijuana people heard that the Oregon Health Authority had said, okay, edibles are going to be here June. Well, that's great. You get 1 per day. 1 per day? I want to do a profile for you a second. This is not built on 1 per day. I've never ate 1 brownie in my life. Okay? I've ate 1 row of brownies. The only time I ate 1 brownie was when there was 1 brownie left. It's like so when we started in Colorado, when they started to put marijuana into candy bars and brownies and gummy bears, they had really high THC contents. And what happened in Colorado was people that had smoked pot for 20 years. It's like, oh yeah, about time they made this legal. It's okay. I'm gonna give me some of their brownies. Now, I don't think people in Colorado necessarily really talk like that, but there might be one of them. And so they had a brownie, and you're eating the brownie. Now I've been smoking pot for 20 years. When I smoke pot, I get high in 7 seconds. Just like a nicotine user, you smoke that cigarette, nicotine goes up there in 7 seconds. But I'm going to eat a brownie. And I eat that brownie. It's like, I got nothing. You got something? I got nothing. Give me another brownie. So they eat another brownie. Because when you put stuff in your stomach, it takes a long time for that drug to get up to your brain. So after I load up a couple of brownies, about 30 minutes later, bam! All that THC hits my brain. And I've got an experience that's nothing like I ever had smoking pot. And I have a psychotic-like experience. And I don't like it. And there's little voices going off in my head, and people are turning, it's not good, it's negative, it's horrible. And we laugh about those stories because we go, oh, that was nothing, man, that was like crazy stuff. And if you're a 40-year-old adult, that's kind of a funny story. As you hear things that nobody else hears and see things that nobody else sees, and your respiratory system's going wacko. But if you're 4 and you eat that brownie, now I can't verbalize what's going on. And I'm looking at my mom, and I see her moving her lips, and I can't hear her words, and I'm hearing weird things. And that's terrifying for a kid. And my anxiety goes up because now I'm getting really scared, and now I can't breathe. That's what happens with edibles and kids. And the state of Colorado saw a big jump in marijuana poisonings and little kids being hauled in. We've had an increase in those here. Our child welfare system has had a couple cases with marijuana edibles, and they're not even here yet legally, but they're here, right? And we're going to have a bunch more of that. And again, it's just like if somebody said, I want to argue the right of a product for an adult, a THC-infused brownie. It's like, I don't argue all you want. Have a brownie. But you better put that under lock and key so your 4-year-old can't get into it. When Colorado went legal, the big paper in Colorado, I think it's the Denver Post. And so they said, look, we got a bunch of people who are selling this product, using this product, and we're going to try to inform them instead of scare them, or instead of sounding like a bunch of marijuana positive people. We just want to do solid articles. And I give this to caseworkers all the time. A woman wrote an article it's called The Cannabist. And she said, I smoke pot, I'm a regular recreational user, and I have kids. I'm a mom. And the thought of my kids getting into my pot is mortifying. I do not want my children into any kind of mood-altering substance. And here's what you do to make sure that doesn't happen. And she wrote an article about basically how to lock up your stash. And I give that to every caseworker because I says, if you start telling people you're just the government worker, but if somebody who smokes pot and is a mom and is not from the Department of Human Services writes about it, it's got more credibility. And we're getting kind of a good response. We actually pass that out a lot. And you've got to be sensible. Even the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws knows you've got to be sensible. You've got to protect your kids. And so you can't have those edibles anywhere. When I told you about that $996 million of sales in Colorado, one of the things that was pretty shocking to Colorado was that about 40% of that money was from edible products. Nobody thought that market was going to be that big. And when you read the product list, you can go on site, go to Colorado marijuana stores, and it'll direct you, and it'll tell you their product line. Double marshmallow caramel wonder. Like, well, that sounds good. Like all these gorgeous coconut cluster, but they're all marijuana candy bars. So, personal story. I take my daughter to college last fall, and I'm driving with my wife because we got some time to kill. And we're going by this place, and she says, Starbuds. Starbuds? There's a store called Starbuds. So I turn around, and she's like, I got to take a picture of that. I was like, I'm going to go inside. So I go inside, and I ask for the manager, and I said, look, I'm an addictions counselor. I'm from Oregon. We go live in about 2 months, and I just want to see if you'll tell me how this thing lays out. And he says, absolutely, come on back here. He was wonderful. He was super great. And he says, look, obviously I'm a guy who thinks that there's room for this product legally. And he said, but we've got crazy people that smoke pot. And I can't legislate against them any more than the alcohol industry can legislate against alcoholics. Any more than the gambling industry can do anything about that 6 to 7% of people who are going to lose everything they own to a pathological gambling problem. But here's what we've done. And he showed me the child-proof packages. They dramatically lowered the THC content in those products that are aimed kind of at kids. And they put child-proof packaging in, and they did a bunch of stuff. And he said, we're going to continue to have problems with that because the people who have the problems are not the ones who lock up the stuff. And I said, yeah, that's going to be it. We're going to come up with rules. And the folks that we work with. They don't do safety stuff so well. So we're going to see more of this. Our caseworkers are going to walk in, and those houses are going to be smoking a bunch of pot, and people are going to kind of wave it in our face and say it's legal now, there's nothing you can do. But I want to tell every caseworker, and I do, we've never cared whether drugs were legal or not. When people said, Jay, I went out there, but they have a medical marijuana card. I said, we don't care if they have a medical marijuana card. We don't care if their oxycodone is prescribed. We don't care if they have a prescription or not, if it's legal or not. We've never gone out to a house where we have a horrifically drunk parent and said, well, we're here to investigate possible child abuse and neglect. And, are you over 21? We are so sorry. Excuse us, we'll just leave. No, that's not how that rolls out. If your drug use is unsafe for your kid, we're there. It's about the safety. And it's a little more difficult sometimes with marijuana to ascertain what's unsafe or not. So it's causing a big challenge for our workers, because a lot of the negative studies on marijuana are kind of long-term studies. You know, studies on 6th graders have said that those that were exposed to, it's like, oh God, that doesn't hold up as a safety threat for what's unsafe today. So we're formulating those questions a little better to get at, is this parental marijuana use, legal or not, unsafe for that kid? But it's a little harder to get at. But legality has nothing to do with it. But we learn funny things. I had a case the other day. Said, Jay, we had this grandpa, and the caseworker came to the door and came in, and there were some stems and leaves on the coffee table, because he's a legal grower, he has a medical marijuana card, and he had been like trimming his plant, and there were stems and leaves on the coffee table. It's like, well, how old's the kid? He's like 7. It's like, well, most 7-year-olds don't eat stems and leaves. He's not a goat, is he? I mean, he's like, I mean, most, you don't see your kids out nibbling on the rosebuds or anything. It's like, I mean, but if it's a brownie, that's a whole different thing. So I was like, and the grandpa said, my fault, my error, bad on me. I don't have to do any of that when my kid is around. I can do that when he's in bed. I don't. And he was great. He responded pretty well. But it really wasn't much of a safety issue. I mean, he could have chewed on those things all day and not got high. He got sick. He probably got pretty sick. But those are the kind of things that roll in as workers try to figure out what is a safety issue and what isn't, and how are we going to respond to legal pot. We have foster parents who are certified that have medical marijuana cards, and they already keep their stuff under lock and key, and there isn't anybody in their neighborhood or house who knows that they use it. Okay. Like I say, we don't care about recreational marijuana users. We don't care about medical marijuana users, unless it starts to slop over there to their unsafe. If you got people that, most recreational drinkers don't start at 10 a.m., so when we walk into houses and people are getting stoned at 10 o'clock in the morning and there's 6 guys around a coffee table with the bongs that we're recreational users. It's so cool. It's like, no, that's kind of not what we had in mind. You should have taken your kid to school. It's 10 o'clock. Oh, man, I meant to do that. And that's sort of the marijuana and time thing is a safety issue, especially with little kids. So, but we're having to sort that out because we haven't focused this much on marijuana ever. The other thing is with the medical marijuana stuff, I mean, if you go down the bottom there, that's the extract, the middle one, non-psychoactive medical cannabinoid topicals. There are medical marijuana products that you guys have never heard of, and I'm going to tell you they're going to get better and better, and they work for a bunch of things, and we haven't researched marijuana much because we made it illegal 95 years ago. But a bunch of that marijuana-based medication works, and a bunch of it is going to be used by people. And when we're talking about this stuff, nobody's getting high from that stuff. The dangerous one is the bottom one, cannabinoid extract. These are the words. These are the key words. Dabs, butane honey oil, butter. You got that little bud part right. Okay. Shatter, wax. These products, for example, shatter level, THC levels as high as 90%. Now, the reason that's a big thing, if you don't know what THC levels are, you got to think that near beer kind of analogy, the near beer and the hard liquor stuff. The best marijuana stuff you could smoke was around 25 to 30%. If you got really good pot, you might have something between 20 and 30%. This stuff is up to 90% THC. That's why it has a completely different effect on the user. And when you go home tonight and you look that stuff up on Google Images, you'll see a bunch of crazy behavior that doesn't look anything like smoking pot that you thought. This is not the Cheech and Chong movie. This is not the Fast Times at Ridgemont High. This is like, whoa, this is over the top. You've also heard probably of BHO explosions. BHO, butane. To make this stuff, you put butane under pressure. For those of you who know, that's just not good. Flammable products under pressure, you got to be knowing what you're doing. It's like the meth lab thing. If you type in on Google Images BHO explosions, you'll see all these houses and kitchens that are blown up and houses burned down. It's super dangerous stuff. Now, these products are going to be legal and in the stores. When I was at Starbuds, and I said, well, tell me about the extract products. And the guy went to this little, glass-covered, beautiful, beautiful, gorgeous cabinet. And he had a bunch of canisters. It looked like 35 millimeter canisters. And he opened it up, and he shook out in his hand on wax paper 2 little shavings, about, 1.5 inches by 1 inch. Looks like peanut brittle, kind of like amber. It was $80. Like $80 is $80. I'm like, that's $80? $80. And so some of what our caseworkers and treatment people are doing is like, so you smoke cigarettes? Yeah, I smoke. If you smoke a pack of cigarettes, $5 a day, it's $150, right? You drink alcohol? Oh yeah, I drink a little. How much do you drink? And you add up the alcohol bill. Are you a recreational marijuana user? Yeah, like a little bit. Oh, how much do you smoke? And all of a sudden you've got like $300-400 a month. If they're gambling on top of that, you got people that are rolling out $400 to $800 just on vices. Like, I know everything's so expensive. Yeah, we wanted to put them in the soccer program, but you had to buy the butter. So you don't have any money. Yes, sir. Well, we're talking about the retail industry in our state. And when you have, and his question had to do with why are we allowing those products to be legal? It's kind of like the battle that you see with Oregon State liquor stores versus why can't we just go to Fred Meyer and buy our hard liquor? And some of those are long-standing philosophical processes about drug and alcohol policy. And so as new products become available, we make an open retail market. The lobbyists for this stuff are pretty convincing. And the other reality, it's like gambling. You can find a whole bunch of people that think gambling should be completely eliminated, at least completely eliminated from a state revenue source, because it's sinful, it's awful, some people get addicted. 94% of people do not end up as pathological gamblers. So the legislature looks at, I got 94% of the constituency that wants to play, video poker. And I've got 94% of the people who are going to use this product are not going to end up as somebody we would consider cannabis dependent. I mean, alcohol kills more people than all the other drugs combined. It's been legal for years. And we sell it all over the place. And so it's got to do with our philosophy that comes up in every legislature about we're not going to tell every American what they should be doing. We'll try to respond to the ones that run into trouble. But as you know, we don't always respond. It would be lovely, for example, if all the alcohol revenue in every state would start the use of that revenue with alcohol and drug treatment on demand and then use the leftovers for other parts of the state budget. But that is not how state legislatures go about that. So, I mean, it's kind of no different than every other product, and that's not a good answer because I'm an addictions counselor. But most people who buy this stuff are not people that are going to end up in treatment. But the people who end up in trouble are going to be using this stuff. My dad showed up at the front door every day with a beer. Hey, how you doing? Come on, are you watching the ball game? Ham's beer. Guys remember Ham's beer? And the Ham's beer bear, they had the best bear. Animated bear, because that's an adult product. And adults like animated bears. That's how they sell their beer, is the Ham's beer bear. And he carried that beer around and presented to the world that he was a guy who loved baseball, loved football, and just had a beer. Having a beer. You want a beer? Oh, God, I gotta run and check on something. I'll be right back. You might be interested. And he'd take off. And he'd go in the bathroom, go in the garage. And in the bathroom, toilet bowl, that nice cold water. In the garage, in our cars, back in the pantry, were bottles of vodka. My dad's a chronic alcoholic, and he would down that vodka. He wasn't a beer drinker. He could nurse a beer all night long, but he was slamming vodka. Now we have a group of people who say, oh, yeah, I got here in Oregon, like a little bud once in a while. Just like a little good stuff, like a little Colombian. You know how it is. No big deal. And they present as that guy. Just likes to get high once in a while. But underneath it, just like with my dad, they're using a ton of this, and they're not buying it legally yet because they can still get it in the black market. I mean, state of Washington, I think University of Washington did a study. It's going to take about 6 or 8 years before the legal market overtakes the illegal market. People can still make this stuff and sell it. And, they're blowing up their garages all the time. We just had an explosion. I think it was East Portland a couple weeks ago, where they blew up a garage trying to make their own. So again, for us in the child welfare arena, it's just like, well, it's here. Recreational marijuana is here. We're going to do what we always do. Try to find those people who are cannabis dependent, who are addicted to pot, at a level that their pot use is unsafe for raising kids. The other key factor is that a huge percentage, around 50% of people who abuse marijuana also drink a bunch of alcohol. And we kind of miss that sometimes. Like, oh, you're marijuana? How much THC do you use? Do you shatter? And the question should follow, and how much Jack Daniels? And how much beer and how much wine? Because we got a bunch of people who do both. And, of course, if you take somebody who's driving their kids to school every day and they're beyond recreational marijuana use and also drinking on top of it, you got a really messed up driver hauling those kids around at 4 in the afternoon. Yes? Is marijuana a depressant like alcohol? No. Marijuana doesn't fit neatly into any of those categories. And anybody who's used it would not talk about depressant effects. It sort of can go along the lines of a hallucinogenic to some extent. It's a psychoactive drug, but it doesn't fit neatly into any of those kind of categories. The biggest issue that people have when they, for example, are going in withdrawal, it's kind of like withdrawal from, caffeine, cigarettes. You're anxious, you're frustrated, you're angry, you're grumpy, and you can't sleep. So when we got people that are using a whole bunch of pot, and we say we want you to quit, and they mean this sincerely, don't get me wrong, okay? It's just like, if I'm dependent on pot to go to sleep every night, and anybody who's done this, anybody who smokes some pot knows, man, you can go right to sleep. You smoke some pot, you'll go right to sleep. It helps you go to sleep. It doesn't necessarily give you better sleep. But people get dependent on going to sleep stoned every night. And if I've been doing that for 5 years and I got some DHS person knocking at my door threatening to take my kids, like, oh, fine. I can go off pot. I don't need to smoke pot. And then that night they try to go to sleep and they can't. They say, well, I'll just do it tonight and then I'll start this tomorrow. And they can't. And then they say to you sincerely, look, I think I need a medical marijuana card because I literally can't sleep without, I'm kind of scared. I don't know how I would sleep. I think it's a medical problem. And they believe that sincerely. And the reality is if they quit their pot use, they would have a really tough time going to sleep for a few weeks. I mean, they would have to go through that withdrawal period until their body could get back on a normal cycle of going to sleep without being stoned. But they sincerely believe that they got a medical problem that can only be medicated with pot. So they're not going to want to give it up any more than you want to give up caffeine every morning. Because you know how you are about your caffeine. Yes? What you just said about being unable to multitask while under the influence is true of pretty much every drug once you get to the intoxication stage. Like when you first use meth, it's like when you first use coffee. It's like, wow, I can focus. I can do 3 things at once. And you look great. And by the way, hey, I'll see you tomorrow. And you can do that until the meth withdrawal, and then you can't track anything. And then you're talking about 3 different things at once. So all drugs basically have that. Intoxication kind of levels on any drug. The example of if we all go out and have a few drinks and there's 6 people talking at the same time and you have a buzz from drinking one, you can kind of track everything at once. But once you start to get drunk, what is, I don't know. Did you ask me a question? It's just like you can't track. Your brain can't function. So I would say that's true, that multitasking thing is true of all drugs. What tends to be true around marijuana, what you see that if you talk about relationships and where somebody's using marijuana all the time, is kind of that lack of connection, lack of passion. You know, the wonderful thing about marijuana, it makes you laid back, and the horrible thing about marijuana is you're always laid back about everything. I think I'm going to leave you. Okay. I mean, if you feel you need to do that, it's like, no, you should be mad. Okay, you want me? Okay, I'll be mad. It's just like, and when I was doing family counseling, it was just, people would just be emotionally saturated, like he doesn't care about anything that happens. He's never mad. He doesn't hit anybody. He gets stoned every day and chills all the time. There's no investment. And that's kind of that long-term user. But they're not committing crimes and doing crazy stuff, but there's no emotional person there anymore. The recreational user doesn't look like that. So sometimes people get, well, that's not what marijuana does. It's like, no, that's what getting stoned every day does. That's different than recreational users. I think I have 1 minute. So one last question over here. Yes, the whole issue, let me try to wrap that up in a couple ways. When people are using recreational marijuana and they go into alcohol and drug treatment, they're supposed to be clean of all mind-altering substances. So they don't get to hang on to THC. Like, well, marijuana's legal now. It's like, well, so is alcohol, but you're not supposed to get drunk anymore either. Treatment programs struggle with marijuana, though, because some people get the medical marijuana card, so you got to take all your medical marijuana card people and put them in one treatment group. And the reality is that what treatment programs even see is like, you know, there's actually some benefit with all the stuff this guy has going on for him to continue on THC. So we're saying for this person under this circumstance, and then you're trying to monitor their use if they're using it, because we don't prescribe marijuana, we just authorize it. But clean dates are really clean. You're not using anything. Now, I can't tell an individual person how to define his clean date, but the norm for the system of people who invented the word clean date would not accept, I'm clean. I mean, except for recreational marijuana. We've had people for years that, you know, it's like they get arrested for DUI and do all kinds of stuff, but their drug of choice, the big one that got them arrested, was cocaine or heroin. And so they get clean off heroin. Well, I still like my wine. Dude, you're not clean. It's like, you don't get to, you know, I'm clean off, you know, liver. I've been clean off liver, you know. Great. You know, I'm eating 12 pounds of hamburger a day, so my meat intake is still pretty good, but I'm clean, not, you know, off liver. That doesn't work that way. I can be up here for a while afterwards. I want to encourage all of you, and you can ask me questions. You can always email me. You can always email me. You guys on the seat, you don't have to hesitate for a second. I'm glad to help you with any question, clarification, and assist you with your teams. But I think we're kind of at the end of it, at least for the video piece. Thank you very much, and I'll be here for as long as you need me.